And there is something, even when you don't understand the words that you're singing and you don't know what's going on, there's, as you will know, and from all the work you do, there's just something soul-searching about suddenly hearing all these people who I don't know, our voices coming together with these amazing acoustics in this church. It'd just be moved to tears most weeks. So it was just really nice. It was suddenly that I had something to do on a Tuesday night, and also I had a sense of belonging. I was part of this choir. I wasn't just that weird British woman who had rocked up. I had an identity.
You're listening to This Is Why We Sing, a podcast with me, James Sills. I'm a musician, a singing leader and an author, and I'm passionate about the power of singing. But don't take my word for it. In this series, I invite guests from across the singing world to share their insights and their inspiration. I believe that singing can help us to lead happier, healthier and more fulfilled lives. And I realise that that's quite a big claim. And so for this second episode of the podcast, I thought it was important to invite someone who knows all about happiness. Helen Russell is a happiness researcher. She's an author and a journalist, and I first became aware of her work in 2015 with her best-selling book, The Year of Living Danishly. As Helen explains, she moved to Denmark to start a new life with her husband and set about finding out the secrets of why Denmark, at that time, was deemed the world's happiest nation. And singing did indeed play a part in that. So we talk about Helen's research, both in Denmark and in cultures across the world, about her experience of joining a choir in Denmark and how that made her feel more part of her local community. And more generally, we talk about the power of songs and how they can match our emotional states. And this is particularly relevant with her new book, How to Be Sad, which is released on 4th of March 2021. I'm so grateful to Helen for agreeing to appear on the podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation and we bonded over our secret love of Disney songs and our not so secret love for the Pet Shop Boys. This was recorded at the start of 2021 when both Helen and I were still in lockdown in our respective countries due to coronavirus. Anyway, hope you enjoy. Here I am in conversation with Helen Russell, myself recording in North Wales and Helen over in wintry Denmark. Well, welcome, Helen, to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We have so much to talk about. But the first thing I'd like to know is what song is in your head right now?
What's been in my head and the whole family's head for some time is Into the Unknown from Frozen 2. That I never planned on sort of getting so much into kids' films, and I never watched any of that before I had kids. And now just... honestly, I don't know if it's because we're in lockdown, but it feels like I'm getting life lessons with every re-listen. It's those surging kind of chords. So yeah, it's constantly in my head.
Pulling on the heartstrings, those Disney songs. Well,
yeah.
Do you know what? Actually, not that song, but some Frozen songs have been in my head a lot. Because I think my kids might be a bit younger than you, but my eldest is just getting into Frozen with no half measures. But yes, I know what you mean, actually. I kind of resisted at first, and then I thought, I'm just going to enjoy this, you know?
And there is something kind of cinematic as well. You know, we're in winter right now, but you just sort of go out into the world and it's quiet and it's all a bit eerie and odd. And I don't know if we're all going slightly stir crazy, but it sort of feels like you need some sort of soundtrack to your life. And so maybe you are in a film and maybe this is what's playing. I'm getting very into it.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about happiness today, very, very broadly. And I think on your website, you describe yourself as an author, a journalist, and a happiness researcher, which sounds like a very exciting mix of things. Let's just start off by how might we define happiness, or how do you define happiness?
Well, goodness. I mean, the official answer is it's defined by it's measured in a quite interesting way, in a more scientific way than perhaps some people might expect. So that they ask people, how are you feeling today and how are you feeling with your life overall? But then there's also the Aristotle idea of happiness, of this life with purpose, having a meaning. So it's all of these things. And of course, it's very individual. I think for me, it's around doing work that I enjoy and feel passionate about and being able to have conversations with people. This year's been so hard not being able to do that, having that connection, and then spending time with my family and doing all the silly fun stuff. But there are things that always play into happiness, as you'll know. Things like the government that you're living under, your socioeconomic status, your availability of childcare and work, and all of that stuff. So there's all of these different pieces of the jigsaw. It's endlessly fascinating wherever you're looking in the world.
Yeah, and looking around the world is what you did in your 2018 book, The Atlas of Happiness, which is a beautiful thing. It's beautifully written and beautifully illustrated. And what was the kind of the remit of that book?
So I was interested. A little background for anyone who might not know is that I currently live in Denmark, and I moved to Denmark when my husband was offered his dream job working for Lego out here. And when I moved here around that time, Denmark kept being voted the happiest country in the world. It was when these polls started to be done by the UN and things, and I became fascinated by this and started researching into why and looking at every area of Danish life to see what Danes did differently. And when that book came out, it was published all over, and I started to hear from people all around the world sharing their own country's happiness secrets, and it sort of opened up my eyes a little bit. I thought, well, I've just been focusing on Denmark, but of course, yes, every country wherever they end up ranking on the happiness scale, people have their own ways of getting through each day and surviving. So I ended up speaking to people, from Costa Rica, from Russia, from New Zealand, all over the world, just finding out what it was that each country did differently, what was their unique happiness concept that we could perhaps learn from and try wherever we are in the world.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so there's no kind of one best fit. It adapts and morphs according to different cultures and different countries. And I was delighted as a singer and as a singing advocate to find that singing was in there in quite a few of the happiness secrets that you discovered. So I was hoping we might talk a little bit about that. We'll start with one fairly close to home, just over in Ireland, which is, am I going to get the pronunciation wrong here? The crack?
Do you know what? I think that's as good as you can get if you're not from there. I mean, it doesn't sound right in my accent either. No one wants to hear a home county's accent saying the word crack. It's just weird. But yeah, my friend Neve would coach me on how to say it right, and I'd never quite get it. But yeah, of course, it's this idea that everyone, I guess, has a sense of what they think the crack is, and alcohol is often involved. Storytelling is a massive, massive part of it. But the singing and the idea, my friend Neve would put it, that she would pop into a pub and perhaps there'd be somebody from a folk band there, and then they would sort of strike up and they'd literally break into song, which as a sort of repressed Englishwoman just blows my mind a bit, that they would spontaneously break into song and end up singing. She'd tell me times when she'd sung until 3 a.m, and there'd be endless verses of songs, and just there's a real joy and coming together and spontaneity that feels pretty special and warm and just fun, just really fun.
Yeah, and I guess there's also that thing that there's not the big distinction that we might have in other places or just in our own minds about this is, I am a performer or I am an audience member.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yes, it's very inclusive. All the people I spoke to were at pains to point out that it's very inclusive, but there's also a sense that one of the interviewees put it that if you have a voice, it's your duty to use it. So if someone asks you for a song, then you sing. And that's quite interesting as well. But at the same time, everybody is included. But if you do have a particularly great voice, then yeah, why shouldn't you share that? That's a wonderful gift. What a lovely thing to be able to bring to people.
I love that. Yeah, so it's like if you're asked to sing a song, then who are you almost to refuse?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, because then I guess it becomes more of a social exchange than a musical exchange.
Yes, yeah, and because it is so spontaneous, I guess, as you say, there's not that definition between performer and civilian, but there's also not that definition between performance and normal time chatting in a pub. So exactly. That feels lovely as well, the idea that it can just happen.
Yeah, that can just be part of everyday life. That just reminded me of an exchange I had when I lived in Ghana for a year, where again that kind of the division of who's a performer, who's the audience member, kind of wasn't really as apparent. And the Ghanaian family I was staying with, we went to church, and he was like, "You might as well join the band, you'll have a lot of fun." And so someone just handed me a bass guitar. And I play guitar, but I'm not really a bass guitarist. So I was all being, oh no, I couldn't, I'm not really a bass, and I don't really know any of the songs. And they were like, they were like, "Oh, Bruni, white man, you must play. You're here. Come on," you know.
I love that.
And suddenly, the social kind of contract was more important than any kind of musical worries that I might have had.
Yes, that's a really interesting point. Yes, and that's so appealing to me personally because it's not what I'm naturally good at. So all of the research I do and all of the going and speaking to people and going out there and speaking to strangers, it's completely out of my comfort zone, and I would not do it if I were not doing it in a professional capacity so much. So the tenacity that gives me is really helpful. I really value it. So I love the idea of coming from a culture where that is expected, where that is normal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it becomes a different type of exchange, I guess. Fantastic. Okay, in terms of, putting yourself out of your comfort zone, I believe that as part of your research for the Atlas of Happiness, you found yourself learning the haka.
I did, yes. And I was very worried about, the idea of cultural appropriation, but I've had it explained to me by many people now that even the former Maori Party leader has encouraged the teaching of the haka in different parts of the world to actively promote Maori culture, and that my teacher actually had blessings from his elders to open it up to other people. So I think many of us have an idea in our heads of the haka as this very kind of powerful macho series of movement and singing, and from perhaps the New Zealand All Blacks, but
Right.
Actually it was fascinating to learn more that actually haka isn't about aggression. It's that strength and showing emotion are one and the same in Maori culture, which is, it sort of takes a little while to sink in. The idea that you can be strong and show emotion and that is equally valid and they are the same is just a bit of a game changer for us, certainly in the UK. And so that was really interesting. I found my body and my voice doing things that I didn't know it could and that it hadn't done before, and it was slightly daunting to go into it as a newbie at the beginning, but of course that's another very inclusive thing. And you see after the Christchurch shootings, that there is this rush to come together as a nation, and new hakas are being written and performed, and that it is everybody is allowed to be a part of that. That's incredibly generous, and what an honor to be a part of that. But it feels like a really extraordinary thing that I now try and encourage everyone to try and experience if they are able to.
Yeah. So when you are actually in the workshop, because I also have had the real pleasure of learning a haka when I was over in New Zealand as part of the WOMAD festival. I was performing at WOMAD, and we went to a marae, and I think we might have learned the same. I might have learned the same haka as you, actually, after reading the book.
Yeah.
But it's a very, like you say, it's a very physical thing. The voice is a big part of it. I don't know, how did you kind of find that experience, like that kind of coming together of all those different kind of elements? Because I found it really, really powerful.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I think there was a very interesting difference in the way people felt about it at the end, depending on whether they were male or female, actually. I think because a lot of the women were unused to using their bodies to make such powerful, these sort of warrior, powerful shapes, sometimes some of these things, and the voice in that way as well. Whereas it seemed to come more naturally to some of the other people there. So I think that seems like an incredibly powerful thing, especially, I've talked to girlfriends a lot about it since, and that for women to get in touch with the full spectrum of their body and their voice, and to kind of harness that assertiveness felt really useful and important.
Yeah, and do you ever find yourself just occasionally when you need a little pick-me-up, just doing a bit of a haka in the house?
Well, do you know what? In Ted Lasso, one of my other lockdown favourite shows, at one stage they're trying to sort of confuse the opposition, and they end up doing some, haka on the football pitch. And there was a part of me that's like, yes, this is what I've been waiting for. I can't wait to get out in the world again.
Get haka in. We've talked about haka there. But I know that you've written about singing as well in the book you mentioned at the beginning, The Year of Living Danishly. And it was really, really interesting here. You wrote about I think it was the third chapter where you kind of decided you needed to go and get some hobbies and integrate.
Yes, I didn't know anyone. I should point that out. Not just
That's
didn't
right.
have any friends, any family. Didn't know anyone.
This is okay. Well, I'd be really interested just to hear about that kind of journey. Really, the moving to Denmark, but then also, your experience of singing and how that might have helped that transition, or it might not have helped.
Yeah, so I think like many people, I was in choirs at school, and I really loved singing at school, and I did some of the grades and things, and I really loved it. But then I went to university and I drank too much and shouted along to songs too much and just never really took care of my voice at all. And so I kind of was of the opinion that my singing days were done. As many people do when they reach adulthood, you think, well, that was something you did then and you don't do it now. But suddenly being in this new country where I knew nobody, I didn't have anything to be I was trying desperately to get freelance work, but I didn't have anything to do with my social life. I didn't have a social life. And I had already noticed that Danes are very fond of breaking out into song, as you may well have noticed also. They officially have, as a side note, the lowest levels of something called gilotophobia in the world. Have you come across this?
No, what's
gilotophobia. This is the fear that people will laugh at you. And Danes have the lowest
wow.
levels of this. So they are really fond of breaking into song at many occasions. And you will often go to an organised event and be handed a song sheet. It's just part of the course. They sing songs about Volvos. They make up songs about their colleagues and put them to the tune of ABBA. So there's been a lot of singing, and I thought, well, a lot of these people, they haven't got great voices, but they're enjoying it, so maybe I could too. So I found out that there was a choir, and I went along, and it was a gospel choir. It was in a Methodist church. It's all combining many different cultural influences, and it was all Danes. And I didn't know what I was singing in Danish, so that was interesting. And I was dubbed an alto, and last time I'd sung, I'd been soprano because I'd been very small. So it was really interesting. I was sort of put in place, and there is something, even when you don't understand the words that you're singing and you don't know what's going on, there's, as you will know, and from all the work you do, there's just something soul-surging about suddenly hearing all these people who I don't know, our voices coming together with these amazing acoustics in this church. It'd just be moved to tears most weeks. So it was amazing. And I had things to do suddenly. That was really helpful. But I didn't necessarily make new friends there, because Danes take quite a long time to make friends with people. They are a little like Londoners in that respect. It takes a long time to open up. But they were very sort of smiley and welcoming. And, I ended up doing concerts with them. And, all of the research, we all know how good singing has been proven to be for our mood and for feeling a sense of belonging. So it was just really nice. It was suddenly that I had something to do on a Tuesday night, and also I had a sense of belonging. I was part of this choir. I wasn't just that weird British woman who had rocked up. I had an identity outside.
Yeah, exactly. And you were part of it. You were in the frame. And I imagine, moving to a brand new place, that must have been really important to you at that time.
Yeah, really, really helpful. And actually it sort of gave me the confidence to try more things, and I was already researching into happiness at the time, so every week I was sort of buoyed up by remembering how much I had loved it last time and how much it had meant to me the previous week, and then B, each new week I was learning new things about what the impact of the music was be doing on my brain and on my mood. So that was really interesting as well.
Yeah, that's all the stuff that fascinates me as well. Were you singing in Danish?
Singing in Danish, yeah.
Well, this is impressive stuff here, Helen.
It's really not.
Come on.
It's really not, because I had to, the concert, the first concert, I had to have the words written out phonetically and then sellotaped to the woman in front of me's back. Because I didn't know what, my Danish is still terrible.
Do you know what? There's some people in my choirs who are singing in their native tongue and they still, don't remember words. So I think that's absolutely permitted.
Thank you very much, James. You heard it here. Done.
Wasn't a choir called Happy Voices, was it?
No.
Okay, because I'm just remembering I had a wonderful, I think it's 2.5, 3 weeks in Denmark touring in 2015 with the Spooky Men's Chorale, and we did a gig with a really fantastic gospel choir called Happy Voices. I can't tell you where it was, but it was brilliant. Yeah, so I don't know. A gospel choir is a big thing in Denmark, or is just singing generally a big thing?
I think singing is generally a big thing, and also, I think because Denmark is a pretty I mean, this isn't going to sound a bit odd, but Denmark is a very secular nation. You don't have to pray to a god that everything's going to be okay. In Scandinavia, like, the state has it sorted, is the general approach. So I guess in the UK I would join things like chamber choirs, but there's not that here. There's not sort of big cathedrals. With Jante's law and the Scandinavian idea is that everyone is equal. So there isn't so much grandeur, I think, as you might get in the UK. So I think they go for whatever the sound that they like best.
Yeah, brilliant. A question that I posed to one of my friends who sings in a great choir in Copenhagen, which I actually included in my book, is the singing experience, could we describe that as hygge? Because,
for sure, yes.
Would you say so? Good, okay.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's do you know what might be even more hygge is the break when you get together at half-time interval. I don't know.
Yeah.
And there's always cake and there's tea and then you're sort of talking about it. So the whole experience is because you're feeling those warm feelings and that togetherness, which is so important for hygge. And you're being kind to yourself, which is another key thing for hygge. And especially, after having children, the reconnecting with my diaphragm and my feeling inside my body again, that's been massively helpful. So yes, I think it is, but the break time especially.
Do you know what? I think that's almost exactly what Bodil said. She said, for me, the most hygge part is afterwards. I think she said, like, when we're in the pub or whatever, or we're sitting around and we've had that shared experience and you've kind of got that afterglow of, having had the experience. Yeah. Oh, great. Oh, that's good. I'm going to put a big fat tick next to singing and hygge. That's excellent. Thank you. So yeah, it would definitely appear that singing can contribute to our happiness. But singing has also become part into the mainstream conversation around kind of well-being and mental health. And I know that I think Denmark, like with so many things, it seems to be, ahead of the curve, of where we might be in the UK in terms of social prescribing, arts on prescription. And I know that there's some fantastic schemes in Denmark at the moment that are harnessing not just singing, but also other kind of cultural activities for people who might be experiencing mental health problems or long periods of unemployment. Is that something you could tell me a bit about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wrote a piece about this for The Guardian last year, and it's becoming really big here. Maybe it was the year before because we've been in lockdown. But so near where I am, they're called culture vitamins courses. Where
I love that.
I know, it's so nice.
So what is there a Danish word for that?
It's culture vitamin.
Oh, all right, okay, great. Oh,
you're pretty much fluent already. You're fine. Yeah. But yeah, there's a course for people who, as you say, have been on long-term sick leave or are unemployed, and I think it's 10 weeks. The one that I follow people on, and they have things like they have singing in a choir, they have visits to art galleries, they have sessions where they're read to in a library, which just seemed so moving that they sit in a darkened room with like blankets and a librarian reads to them for 2 hours, which just seems so lovely. But yeah, it's a really big thing, and one of the organisers I spoke to explained it in terms of when you're depressed, culture is often the first thing you don't bother with, which is certainly been my experience as well. It's just it's one of the things that seems like it's a nice to have when actually you and I both know it's pretty essential. And you just want to get through the day. And so the facilitators of these courses, they feel that their role is to get them used to going on these cultural excursions again, or even introducing it for the first time. And I think there's so much research around the power of rituals. So, for example, with the singing in a choir as part of the culture vitamin course, you're getting all of the benefits of doing that and that sense of belonging. But because it's structured and ritualized through this 10-week course, there's a real sense of obligation. So you might not feel like going one day, but you go because you've signed up and you're committed. And this apparently works really well for men here. I mean, Danish men, it's similar to British men. There's a slight aversion to perhaps accepting help or asking for help and being honest about vulnerabilities. So that's really helpful. And there's also something I've been researching recently, this idea that there's a massive shortage of talking therapy access for many people. So the buddy system is as close as many people can get, and the idea of having a trusted individual who you can speak to, and that can be a friend, it can be anyone who can listen. And the way that the culture vitamins courses are set up in Denmark, it's almost like the buddy system plus rituals, because you're seeing the same people, you can have those deep connections, those great conversations, and it's the ritual, it's part of your diary, so you go. So yeah, and I think everybody's first thought was, well, this must be expensive, but actually it's not. It works. People feel better after it, and I think you have the cost of the setup, but then on the return on the investment, I think you get a £3 return on every £1 investment. So it's just seems like a no-brainer now. It's so worthwhile. It's such a useful thing.
It's amazing. Just all of the different components that you're describing, like the singing on its own is powerful, as we've discussed, but all those other elements that you've talked about, I think, I really hope we start looking to that, in the UK and from other countries, because it's just so, like you say, just from all the research, we just know that these things work.
Yes, and it's proper research, but it's proper. There's an anthropologist, Robin Dunbar, who's very famous, coming up with Dunbar's number, the number of people you need in your life to feel properly connected, and he's at Oxford University. It's research from him. There's been, I think Alan Johnson started looking into this in the UK more than a decade ago, so it's been studied for years, and Australia's had a framework in place to promote arts and health since 2013. So this is not new. This is all just stuff that we should take seriously.
And I wonder if this will gain more traction, in a kind of a post, the post-COVID recovery or whatever. I'm sure there'll be a great Danish word for it. But these things are going to need to be addressed more than ever, and so I hope we can all learn from that, certainly. Dunbar's done some amazing research on singing actually as well, and singing is an evolutionary mechanism, so I hope to track him down for the podcast at some point.
And I think this may be off topic, but I think there are so many people like you who are stepping up to do things that I worry sometimes that some of our government ministers just think, oh, well, it's fine because other people are looking after it. And you think, well, yes, but also the country needs to help with that as well.
Exactly. And that thing about ritual as well. I mean, I've been running the Sofa Singers now for almost a year. It started at the beginning of our lockdown, and it's been twice a week. We haven't stopped with it, at all. And a lot of people have said that's been a real cornerstone of their week, because they know that it's Tuesday night or it's Friday morning or whatever, and they come and they, engage in that, and it's something they feel they're sharing with other people, even though it's digital. And I think actually, that's been important for me, in a year that's where everyone, myself included, has felt quite, unanchored, or
you feel helpless, right?
Just to have those things just to kind of to latch into. So all of the component parts you're describing about the culture vitamin course, just make complete sense. I love the name as well.
Yes, and you can speak Danish. Who knew?
Yeah, great. Oh, well, I'm learning so much in this conversation. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we've talked about happiness, we've talked about health, but let's talk about sadness a little bit as well, because this is, so your new book is out in March 2021. And to give it its full title, it's How to Be Sad, Everything I've Learned About Getting Happier by Being Sad Better, which is, I think, an incredibly intriguing book title. Could you maybe give us a little overview about the book, and then let's just think about how, singing and music and song might come into the picture?
Yes, of course. So I have spent the last 8 years now looking into happiness and writing about happiness. And before all this pandemic hit, I would go and speak about it around the world, and I would meet people, I'd interview people, and I would do all the good stuff that we all love to do. But the more and more often I was travelling and speaking to people, I became struck time and again by how people were so obsessed with the pursuit of happiness that they were actually becoming quite phobic of sadness. And I would have people come up to me after events and say, I've just lost somebody who's very dear to me. How can I be happy? Or I've just lost my job. Or, I'm overwhelmed by caring responsibilities. And they're just sort of, to try and sort of say as gently as possible, that's perfectly normal for you to be feeling sad right now. Sadness is what we're supposed to feel when we experience these losses and disappointments. And I I started looking into that really as well. And I think personally, I lost my sister when I was little, and my mum and I were very much encouraged to just get on that British stiff upper lip thing. And having dealt with my own feelings around emotion and sadness and that propensity for cheerfulness, just carry on, it'll be fine, over the years, I have a very, very wise therapist said, it's no surprise to me at all that you studied happiness for the last 8 years. And now you have to really kind of get in touch with all of your emotions. And it's not just me. The more I started researching into it, the more common I found it, that actually people are really frightened of being sad, especially in the US. Actually, they are the world leaders on being afraid of sadness and chasing happiness. But if we are phobic of sadness, we do ourselves a disservice in so many ways, because sadness is going to happen, so we might as well know how to do it right. And also, by avoiding sadness, any kind of thought suppression has been proven that the thoughts come back tenfold. And also there are some advantages to feeling sad. It makes us kinder. It makes us more clear-eyed. We're less likely to fall prey to either the halo effect, where we think like beautiful, famous people are amazing and perfect, or the fundamental attribution error, where we become defensive and assume the worst intent of people. We have greater perseverance. We have better attention to detail. So this temporary sadness is actually good for us. It's a contemplative state, and if we can sit with it for a while, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it's difficult or awkward, it will be able to move on more quickly and stop normal sadness, which we all experience, from tipping over into something more serious. So of course I'm not saying that you can handle depression by just singing your way through it, although there is also evidence there. But I was just very keen to differentiate between normal sadness and depression, and the fact that in all respects, by sitting with normal sadness and having some really helpful tools to know how to handle it, you can protect yourself a little more against its tipping into something more serious.
So what role might music and songs in particular, songs are just so powerful, aren't they?
Yeah.
When we're talking about singing, obviously we're talking about the songs. Is there anything that you found in your research, or anything in the book, or anything personally that kind of shines a light on that?
Yes. Yeah, I think there's... I always love... You've probably come across this as well. Have you heard the study about the mice and La Traviata? No. This is my favourite study. I like to tell people it and watch them think I'm making it up. But there was a study from 2012. They found that mice who were played La Traviata during recovery from a heart transplant lived almost 4 times longer than mice who were denied their fill of opera. So, the idea that that this sort of soul-surging music has an impact on the humble mouse as well.
Oh my goodness.
I love that, and there's research from Imperial College London showing that live music reduces levels of stress hormones. Attending live concerts can boost moods. So these are all things that can help when we are allowed to do these things again. But from speaking to the culture vitamin experts in Denmark as well, they schooled me a little in music therapy, or what they do there to reduce psychological stress and experiences of depression and anxiety. And this wasn't what I expected at all. I thought there was either going to be something involving bells or Enya, and they said, no, what you really want...
Incense sticks.
Yes, exactly. They said
Whale
music
sounds.
To reduce arousal. I was like, okay, what? I just couldn't think what it was that he was going to say. And then he told me, Jack Johnson.
Right, okay.
Jack Johnson, Banana Pancakes apparently is the music
it's a great
that's
tune.
Of pleasant but not too taxing, and it can just, if you feel yourself, and I've suffered from panic attacks in the past as well, and I can now think about this and think, actually, that would be quite soothing to just bring you back down and ground you. And I'm using my hands a lot, which is no good on our podcast, but you get what I mean. So this idea that studies also show that music can foster a sense of belonging and give us an identity, and even help us heal. And when we're depressed, we're actually more inclined to seek out sad music. So research from the University of South Florida found that we tend to choose the sad music because it's relaxing and calming and soothing, which makes perfect sense. My favourite song is Van Halen's Jump, but when I am at my lowest, that would just feel unthinkable. You need something to match your mood and make you feel less alone. So music, as I'm sure you find as well, gives us that that sort of companionship. And even people who are not depressed prefer sad music when they're feeling down, because it can act like a little supportive friend almost.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a line, I can't remember, it's in the History Boys, and I can't remember, I think it might be quoting somebody, and it says it's that thing about when it's like someone reaching out of the page and saying, like, you know, I feel how you're feeling, I've been there, I'm with you. I'm just paraphrasing there.
No, you're right. That used to be on a Tube poster. That's an Alan Bennett quote that used to be on a Tube poster.
Alan Bennett, yes, of course.
And I love that. Yes, I think books have always done that for me. But and I guess words are probably the one that feel closest to me. But certainly music. There are songs that have the power to floor me still now, and sometimes that can be actually quite helpful. When researching the Atlas of Happiness, there's this amazing concept from, big in Brazil, but it's a Portuguese concept of saudade, which is the melancholy of a happiness that once was. And so it's that bittersweet pleasure of remembering something that you used to love or that used to bring you happiness. And listening to a song that perhaps brings back memories is the perfect example of that. That you sometimes, you're not quite sure why, but you just need to feel sad about something that you've remembered, and so you can listen to a song as a trigger and bring it all back, and then just sit with that sadness and then move on with your day. I think that's very powerful. With it,
yeah, because songs do have that power.
What does it for you?
Well, I was just thinking about that actually. I mean, probably my number one musical love, if I had to pick out one artist, would be Joni Mitchell. And of course, most people know Joni for Blue, which, is really wearing her heart on her sleeve. But, there is a deeply kind of melancholic vein running all the way through Joni's music, which I really, really relate to. And, I generally would say I have a fairly sunny disposition. But there is just something in that music that just really, it really kind of touches my soul. And if there are times I need to listen to Joni, like sometimes it's almost like I've said this to my wife, there are some times where I need to go and get some exercise to just kind of, realign myself or whatever. But there are some times where I literally need to put on a Joni Mitchell record and hear her singing those things. And it's just the sound world that she creates. And when you listen to interviews with Joni, she's incredibly playful. People might expect it to be this really kind of intense, because often her music comes out like that, but she's incredibly kind of playful and articulate and funny, and I kind of don't think that there's a contradiction, between those two things. I mean, I was speaking to David and Nobu from Kwai 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 in Canada, who lead these euphoric mass singing events across the world, and I was talking to Nobu, and he said his favourite genre of music is what he called happy sad music.
Oh, lovely.
Which I really like. Yeah, I'm sure there's probably a Danish word for that exact term. But I knew exactly what he meant. We were talking about some of our favourite artists, Joni Mitchell, John Martin, Nick Drake. Where it's just this kind of very beautiful music tinged with this kind of soulful sadness, which I think, I don't know, it just feels very healthy somehow to engage in that emotion. And that's why I'm really looking forward to reading your book about that kind of just permission to feel those things.
Yes, yeah. And
not necessarily sitting it for a long time.
Yeah, that you can just listen and feel it. And it's such a sense memory. It can take you back to an exact time. I think there's something rather beautiful of that as well, that you can listen to a song and think, oh, I remember that horrific breakup, and actually I can think back and look at it fondly now. That's something really powerful.
Yeah, and not airbrush it out.
Yes, yeah.
Because like you say, it'll catch up with you eventually. What would your kind of go-to song be, if you're kind of, if Jump by Van Halen is too much for you and you just need something.
Yeah. Oh, my go-to sad one. Let me think. What's on my... I normally have a playlist. Well, I have a playlist for every book that I write.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I've got Leap Year here, and you've got your playlist at the back here.
Yeah.
There's some great stuff. There's some Pet Shop Boys in there. Yes.
Yes. Oh, well, it's Pet Shop Boys Suburbia I'm listening to a lot at the moment, actually.
What a song that is. God.
Yeah, it's good. I'm listening to... Yeah, for this song, I've listened to a lot of Talking About a Revolution, Tracy Chapman. I've listened to a lot of Blinded by Your Grace, Stormzy, and Who Loves You, The Four Seasons.
Yes.
Sort of, there's a nuance and a sort of twinge. It's not completely unambiguous. I quite like that.
Those are all great choices. If you had to pick one, we do have a playlist for the podcast where each guest picks a song. So I'm kind of gently narrowing you down here, Helen.
If I had to pick one song forever, then I'm afraid it would be Van Halen's Jump. But in the How to Be Sad, I interview an Arctic explorer, polar explorer, Ben Saunders. And I first met him in 2004 when he was about to go on an expedition by himself. And he told me that the song he has to listen to unzip the tent in the morning when you're going out into an atmosphere so cold that your eyelashes freeze open, he has to listen to Whitesnake's Here I Go Again on My Own. And that always feels quite a sort of, it's rousing, but it's also, it's acknowledging that it could be tough out there, and that's okay too. I think that's quite helpful.
Okay, so should we add that one to the playlist then?
Oh, you can have Whitesnake or Van Halen. I don't mind.
All right, shall I make an executive decision?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll choose one of those two and put it on there. And people can click on the link in the show notes and you'll be able to find which song we've gone for the playlist. Thank you so much, Helen. We've talked about happiness and health and sadness and singing and so much. I wonder if we could just wrap things up if you could tell me one thing that you think singing has taught you as a life lesson. You described, you sung through school and then in Denmark and your flirtations with a hacker. But what can you take from those singing experiences?
I think for me, singing is the quickest and most surefire route to making it feel as though my heart is about to explode. It's that inside you, it feels like it's growing when you're singing, and I love that, and I miss that. Brilliant.
Well, you can sing along at the top of your voice to Frozen 2, like we talked about at the beginning. We don't have to be picky about it. Thanks so much, Helen. That was an absolute joy. Thank you. Thanks again to Helen. I really enjoyed our conversation and I hope that you did too. If you go to the show notes, you'll find a link to the article Helen was talking about with reference to the Culture Vitamin programme in Denmark, a scheme that I find really, really exciting and really inspiring. There's also a link to Helen's new book, How to Be Sad, and there's also a podcast of the same name, which I'd really recommend. It's fantastic. There's also the playlist for this podcast, and for that I chose Helen's number one choice of Jump by Van Halen, so you can stick that on loud and sing along and enjoy that. Thanks so much for all the comments I've received so far on the podcast. It's really, really lovely to hear from you, so do find me on social media. You can find me on Instagram or Twitter at jsillsmusic. That's also the same for Facebook as well. Or you can drop me an email through my website. I really, really love hearing from you. We've talked about lots of Helen's books today. You can find those on her website. And if you fancy a free chapter of my book, you can register for my newsletter at my website, james-sills.com, and you'll get the first chapter of my book, Do Sing, Reclaim Your Voice, Find Your Singing Tribe, as a free PDF download. So please continue to tell your friends about the podcast, spread the good news about singing, and I look forward to welcoming you again on This Is Why We Sing. Bye for now.